What's up, you guys? We're talking UFC Qatar, which is not a bad event, to say the least. In fact, there's a lot of depth to it, top to bottom. You take a look at the top two matches. I would have argued to you a couple days ago that we were looking at title eliminator matches in both of them. Now, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, as Dana White did announce going into UFC 322 that the winner of Michael Morales and Sean Brady would be next to fight for the belt. And, you know, we were happy to see how that fight played out, as we had Morales targeted to not only win the fight, but to get that KO. So we cashed in big there. It seems like Morales is going to be next. I thought that there was a case that if Ian Gary were to go out here and defeat the former champion, the recent former champion in Belal Muhammad, that he could have been next. He's been looking phenomenal. His only recent loss was against Rakhmonov, which that fight came down to a round, and we know Rakhmonov is an animal. But Gary's been taking short notice matches. He had that recent victory over Carlos Pratis. I thought there was a real case that he could have been next, but we'll see if Dana stays true to his word there. And then in the main event, I still do believe that it is the case, of course, if Tsarukyan goes out here and gets a W, that he is next to fight for the belt. He's been the #1 contender for quite some time. Of course, he had that unfortunate situation where he had to withdraw hours before his bout with Islam Makhachev, and Islam Makhachev is now fighting up in the welterweight division. He's the champion up there. But if Tsarukyan were to win, I just don't see any reason why he wouldn't be facing off with Topuria next, and that would be a great test for Topuria. Now, if Tsarukyan were to lose to Dan Hooker, which I'm not trying to show my cards here, but you guys know that the betting odds are wide on that fight. So it would be the rare case that Hooker would go out there and get the job done. If he does, Hooker's not getting a title shot after that win. I don't believe that would be the case. He would then be on a 4-fight winning streak. I would love to see him matched up with Justin Gaethje. Pretty much regardless, even if he takes a loss here, I really want to see that fight. That's a fight that seems like it has to happen before they hang the gloves up, before either one of them hang the gloves up. So I would like to see that happen one way or another, essentially. Besides that, who else do you have at the top here? Oh, Paddy Pimblett, right? There's been some rumors that Paddy Pimblett or Justin Gaethje, we were just talking about Gaethje, could be next to fight for the belt. So if Tsarukyan were to take a loss, maybe you see Pimblett get that match or Justin Gaethje get that match. But I think that both of those fighters, if they were to be matched up for the belt, it would be a little bit of a reach, but you can kind of make it work based off of the name value and the respect that they get on their name, and it would bring in a lot of eyes to the fight. Of course, the bad blood between Pimblett and Topuria, and Gaethje is just a legend of the games. But with no further ado, we'll jump right into this thing. If you guys can, though, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let's go get to it. We'll kick this thing off in the lightweight division, as we have the return of the Tajik Eagle, Nurullo Aliev. And I say the return, not in the sense that he left the promotion and he's back to the UFC. I'm just saying that we haven't seen him inside the octagon in quite some time. It was about 10 months ago that he was last in there when he defeated Joe Selecki, which, interestingly enough, Joe Selecki is a very similar opponent to the UFC newcomer here, Shamrock. The one thing that stood out to me as I was breaking down tape on Rock was how slick he can transition to your back and sink in a rear naked choke. You take a look, out of his 12 victories, 9 of them come by way of submission, the vast majority being rear naked chokes. So he has shown to be decently sharp there, but you also have to take into consideration that it's been against lower level competition. It really has. And then you take a look at his last match where he won via split decision. We saw that when he had to go through a little bit more adversity, not being able to just dominate in that fashion, he doesn't have a lot of tools and tricks to go to. He's somewhat of a one-dimensional fighter. On the feet, he fights out of the southpaw stance, and the striking is just really nothing to rave about. He's going to throw some T-kicks out there, and he'll try to look measured, but there's not a lot of speed, athleticism, and skilled striking that he brings into the cage. So I haven't been overly impressed. And then defensively, it's hard to overlook his lone loss, which came by way of knockout, where he was defeated by Nathan Kelly over at Clan Wars, or at Clan Wars 42. And that was a pretty brutal finish. And we saw that once he was tagged, he was a real fish out of water. I mean, if you look at the way he was moving defensively, he didn't like to be hit. Now, that fight did take place some time ago. It was about 4 years ago. So I'm sure he has developed. And that mixed with the fact that Aliev hasn't really shown to be that dangerous with his striking, I'm not overly concerned with that aspect. But what does concern me is that this fight should play out very grappling heavy, as I think they both kind of welcome that type of fight. And I think that Aliev is the better grappler. I do. I think that he's going to get the better of those grappling exchanges. And it's very likely that we see the Tajik Eagle make a return and get his hand raised. And I think he gets it done via decision. I mean, you take a look at his 10 victories, 8 of them come by way of decision. He did have that ground and pound finish on Dana White's Contender Series, but since officially joining the UFC, we've seen 2 decision victories against somewhat respectable talent, depending on how you look at Selecki. But like I said, that's a good test that he passed, in the sense that I think that Selecki probably is even more dangerous than Shamrock has shown to be. I mean, time will tell, but he already passed that test. He was able to get the better of the grappling exchanges against Selecki. He was able to avoid getting his back taken there. I do have a lot of respect for Raffael Alves, although he was a little one-dimensional. We since saw Alves go over to Karate Combat, I believe it is, and go on to have a lot of success there. He's a nasty striker. It's a little unfortunate that he departed from the UFC. I still love to watch Alves throw down, but I do favor Aliev winning a unanimous decision here. I'm going to say he wins every single round. To play devil's advocate real quick, Shamrock does bring in some size to this matchup. Maybe we see some development, but I wouldn't really expect that, man. He's 32 years old. I think we know what we're getting from him here. He's a pretty much a finished product. And meanwhile, Aliev hasn't been in there in some time. He's a young fighter. We probably see strides from him into this fight. We probably see the best version that we've ever seen, even with the layoff. And all signs to me are pointing towards Aliev winning a decision. Now we'll take a look at the odds for this fight. And what we're seeing here is a very limited movement coming in on Shamrock, as Aliev opened up right around a -320. We see him right around a -300 right now. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked even if he came into the fight somewhere around a -270, 280. I'm not looking too much into the line movement, as, I mean, he's opening up as a pretty hefty favorite. So I don't think there's really anything to it there. I still think he gets the job done. If this line trended down quite a bit, it could be reachable on the money line, but this current line doesn't stand out to me too much. I think what you would want to do is target him to win via decision and see if you can get more of a bargain there and get a more playable line. So give me him to win this fight via decision. We'll head over to the middleweight division, where Ryan Loder takes on Ismail Naurdiev. And Loder is entering this fight off of a tough loss. If you guys remember, Azamat Bekzaat finished him up in just a couple minutes. I will say this, though. I thought that Loder showed some toughness in that fight. Okay, he was hurt. There's no question about it. He never looked for a way out. He was trying to survive through the damage that Bekzaat was putting on him. It was just too much for him to handle, and the fight needed to be stopped. And although Bekzaat just took a tough loss, I still believe that Bekzaat is a dangerous fighter. He is a dangerous fighter. You see the way he comes out there in the first round and throws heavy strikes. So I don't look at the loss in too much of an alarming fashion. I think that Loder is a tough fighter. He obviously brings in the wrestling pedigree. He's newer to the sport of MMA, so even though he is 34 years old, I think that he still has mileage on him. On the other hand, Naurdiev hasn't even hit the 30 marker yet, and he has plenty of professional experience. He has 32 pro fights. Remember, he had that first stint in the UFC where they let him go, and when he went out to fight outside the UFC, things didn't really go that smoothly. In fact, he was finished. I think he was finished 3 times before getting this second opportunity. I mean, if you remember, Vadim Kutsi finished him in the first round. That knockout loss was kind of alarming. He was finished via leg kicks. He was submitted by Marcin Bandel. I think that he is a very flaky fighter. He's been finished in about half of his losses. And I think that even a fighter like Loder, whose striking is limited, I think that it's almost as likely to see Loder crack Naurdiev or finish him in some kind of awkward way as it is for Naurdiev to land a finish on Loder, which Naurdiev is obviously the more polished striker. He's probably the more, or I would say he is the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. But what alarms me is if this fight goes to the later rounds, I think that Loder can have success with his wrestling. And you know what? If you circle back to a fight that took place in Naurdiev's first stint inside the UFC, I know it was a long time ago and he was very young, but if you remember that Chance Reincounter fight, that was a fight that it's a very similar stylistic match here as Chance. He was a very similar fighter to who Loder is right now, right? He was very wrestling and grappling oriented, and he had a lot of success where he had just 2 takedowns, but he controlled him for over 2 rounds in that match. We saw what Park just did to Naurdiev. Of course, there was that flash that Naurdiev had early on in the fight before he landed the illegal shot, but he did have a little flurry early on. But once things didn't go his way and that fight picked back up, we saw him pretty much dominated and taken down, and he was controlled for almost 7 minutes in that fight. And I think that Loder can have success with his wrestling late in this fight, and even early on. I just don't have a lot of faith in Naurdiev. I think that he's a flaky fighter. Sure, he's live to keep this fight standing and be the better striker, or to just land that damaging shot early on, as he's the more polished striker, and he is a tricky striker at that. But I don't have a lot of faith in him. And I think that this is a spot to go in on the dog, all right? And a card where we're looking for some dogs to target. I think that this is a spot. And you take a look at the line movement here. We had Loder opening up as a plus 143, and this line is quickly closing in at even odds. And I'm in agreement with the line movement, all right? I think that Loder's tough. He needs to sharpen up defensively. He needs to weather the storm and play it safe early on. This is a fight that he can take over. And I'm going to put some trust in the dog here. So I think the value's on Loder with him having that plus sign next to his name. And I'll say he wins this fight. I'm actually going to call the finish too. I'm going to say that he finds a finish one way or another. Maybe it's a TKO type of stoppage down in the mat late in this fight. Maybe he could find a sub or something like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if it went to a decision. There's not a lot of confidence in calling the finish. But Naurdiev is, he's flaky and he can be finished. So we'll call that. But Loder can easily win a decision as well with control time and just solidifying rounds with his wrestling. So give me Loder to win the fight. This is a live dog, in my opinion. In comes yet another high-level Dagestani fighter to the UFC roster in Saygid Izagakhmaev. He'll be taking on the longtime UFC vet Nicolas Dalby, who is now 41 and a half years old. I know that's hard to believe when you take a look at his physique. But yes, Dalby is very much up there in age. Now, when we're talking the UFC newcomer here, Izagakhmaev, the first thing that you have to note is that he hasn't fought in about 3 years. The last time we saw him in there was against somewhat of a legend in Shinya Aoki, and he did knock him out. And I think that fight was impressive in the sense that, yes, Aoki is not the same fighter that he once was. Okay, he has aged, and he is a fighter that was undersized, right? Dalby is going to be a larger fighter than Aoki. But the thing that I liked about that performance was Izagakhmaev showed some development with his striking. The way he landed that right cross was somewhat impressive. The way that he followed that up with the ground and pound, I liked what I saw. And I understand, yes, Aoki is a submission specialist and Dalby brings more to the table there. But Dalby is also coming off of his first ever KO loss. And at 41 and a half, I think that's a very noteworthy subject of this fight. I mean, if Dalby gets cracked with another shot here, I think that there's real potential that he can be KO'd. But how is Izagakhmaev going to look coming in off this layoff? I think that he picks right back up. I know he recently had a grappling match over at Karate Combat, but just being part of the circle that he's a part of, right? Being so close to Khabib and Makhachev, I think that carries serious merit. I really do. I think that with that specific group of fighters, I think it carries more merit than any other group or any other camp in the fight game. I mean, if you're going to be around that circle, you know that you have to be taking the game as serious as possible. So I think that he's going to be sharp and ready to go. Certainly, there's some question marks you could have about his game. He's not extremely battle tested. You could bring up the Carlston Harris loss that he had even before getting caught in the second round with that Darce choke, which we know that that's one of Harris's specialties. Even before that, he didn't look phenomenal in that fight. I mean, it wasn't like he was like dominating the fight or just in complete control before getting caught in the sub. Now that was back in 2021. It was some time ago, and I think that he probably has developed and become a better version of himself. I like the way that he looked in the Lepeng fight. Thought he looked pretty good. He didn't find a finish, but I thought he looked pretty good in that fight. He has a respectable submission victory over James Nakashima, who has had a lot of success over in LFA, RFA, and even over in ONE. But yeah, you're not going to rave about the resume, but I think that he's going to come in here and show up. And I think that you got to have some questions about where Dalby is at. Now, if we had prime Dalby coming in here, this is a fight that it's probably going to be a bit of an issue for the UFC newcomer, but I'm kind of questioning where Dalby's at with his age. And I think that we see a little bit of decline in performance here. That's kind of why I'm banking on Izagakhmaev to get the job done. And I think that a finish is possible, but I think he could also win a decision. Now, as we take a look at the betting odds for this fight, where we saw the newcomer open up as a minus 410, we see this line starting to dip. I completely understand why this line's dipping. There's no question about it. With the layoff and based off the fact that even the best that we've seen from him doesn't necessarily warrant him being this large of a favorite. So I wouldn't even be surprised if this line continues to trend down and we see him in the minus 200s. In fact, that's probably what I'm expecting to see. Maybe he settles in as like a minus 250, but I like him to win this fight. I think this could have been a spot, and I see a lot of people talking about there's value in the dog and Dalby here, and people are picking Dalby to win. I completely get it, and I stand with you guys in saying the value's on the underdog, but I'm going to stick with my gut here. I think that Izagakhmaev comes in here, and he gets the job done. I do. I'm not going to pick against him here. I think that he picks right back up off the Aoki victory, and he's probably even a better version of himself than we've ever seen, even with the layoff, right? He's been training. He's had some time to refine his game. I think we see a more complete version. I think that he gets the job done. I think that finish is live. I think it's very live. I think that knockout is potentially live, but I'm going to say he wins the decision, actually. I'm going to say that Dalby hangs tough, and the fight plays out pretty competitively, and it's a decision victory for the newcomer. You guys, if you want my official targets for this event, you know you can shoot me an email or DM me on Instagram. I'll give you further information there. I got a couple different options, but we have been heating up, and we're coming into this event off the profitable UFC 322 fight card. So we're feeling good, and we're looking to throw some units out there for this one. I see a couple spots that I like. So if you're interested, reach out to me. So this, without a doubt, is going to be one of my most anticipated fights of the event. In the bantamweight division, we have two high-level prospects squaring off with each other, and Bekzat Almakhan and Aleksandre Topuria. Of course, Aleksandre, the brother of Ilias, who I believe to be the most skilled fighter on planet Earth. I have him as my #1 pound-for-pound fighter, even after Makhachev just went up and took the welterweight championship. And the thing is, you see a lot of similarities in Alexandre's game. He moves very similar. Now, he hasn't accomplished anywhere near what Ilya has. He's very unproven. He just has 7 professional fights. He does have that one questionable loss where, you know, I've seen people going in on him as they refer to him quitting in that fight, not really taking into consideration that he was 19 years old. He was fighting a much older fighter who seemed to definitely have been on steroids. When you take a look at the physique of the fighter, who also was much larger, the fighter Ivo Ivanov, who's retired undefeated. But I mean, that was just a fight that Topuria should have never been taking at the time. It was mismatched in a variety of ways. Now, the one thing you could still say is he was the much more skilled fighter, even when you rewatch that fight. It's just the size and the maturity that Ivanov brought in, and the steroids, I'm going to say it flat out, was the difference. So I'm sorry. I think that Aleksandre is the truth. I think he's very talented. Now, there's a lot more to be seen from him, but I thought that he looked phenomenal against Colby Thickness. And I know a lot of people aren't extremely high on Thickness, but Thickness was undefeated going into that last match. Let's not just completely dismiss that. But I do understand that Thickness isn't the most polished or promising up-and-coming Australian fighter. I know there's some other fighters that look to be a little bit more promising, but I think that Aleksandre has looked very good. And although he didn't get the finish in that fight, I thought that he showed to be very dominant. And I thought there was a lot of positives that you could have taken away from it, as we saw him mixing things up. We saw him go to his wrestling. He definitely has grappling and wrestling abilities, which is key here, because you cannot forget what happened in Almakhan's fight with Umar Nurmagomedov. It's kind of hard to gauge it because Umar is elite, but I mean, Umar dominated in the grappling. And I would say that Almakhan's real strength is his athleticism and striking, right? He's a diverse striker who really explodes into his strikes. And I think if we see a fighter have success in the grappling, it's going to be Topuria. I think Topuria can change levels and have success in that manner. While on the feet, I mean, he can do just fine there. In fact, when you take a look at Almakhan, although he's had his fair share of knockouts and fights where he's looked phenomenal on the feet, there are some things that you can kind of dive into where you can question them, right? You take a look at, I think it was a head kick, right? The head kick knockout, that he had over Mataus Gloria. That was a fight where he was dropped early on. He got sat down, man. He got pushed up against the cage and he got hit with some big strikes. And I don't know. I think that Topuria in that same situation may have finished him up. So, and there's been some other fights where he's been touched up a little bit and we've kind of seen him not as confident. When he gets touched up a little bit, he'll be a little bit more hesitant. And I think when he's in there with a fighter like Aleksandre, you may see that come out of him. I think it's Topuria that's going to be leading the dance here, right? You may see Almakhan using a lot of movement and using some speed to his advantage at times, but as the fight progresses, that measured approach that we see from Aleksandre, similar to his brother, as he starts to cut the cage off and walk you down, he's kind of heavy on that lead foot, and he's looking to set up those heavy strikes. I think they could pay dividends. I think he could hurt Almakhan here. And even besides that, I mean, he throws nasty leg kicks. The boxing's crisp. He doesn't have to find a finish. I mean, he could still go out there and land the cleaner strikes and get his hand raised in that fashion. But, and I will mention the victory that Almakhan just had over Brad Katona, getting his first UFC victory. That was very impressive, right? The uppercut that he landed, the way that he finished Katona up. I mean, he showcases to be dangerous. I don't want to completely overlook him. I respect his game, but you guys know I'm not picking against my boy's brother here, as I'm a big fan of both the Topuria brothers, and I want to see them both go on to have massive success. I want to see Aleksandre follow in his brother's footsteps, and I think that he's a very fun fighter to watch. And besides that last victory that went to a decision, he's been a fight finisher. He will be live to find a finish in this fight. In fact, that will be my call. I'm going to say that he lands a knockout. As Almakhan looks to land his own damage and looks to engage early on, I could easily see Topuria landing a nasty strike on him with that very, very technical boxing that he possesses. So give me Topuria to land a knockout. And I'll say this, as we take a look at the betting odds for this fight, I've been pretty interested at what I'm seeing. All right, we're seeing a lot of respect on Almakhan. That's what I think. I think that's what we're looking at here. I think that we're seeing a lot of respect on him, because if we were to see Aleksandre matched up with a variety of opponents right now in this division, coming off the dominant UFC debut performance that he just had with the name that he has, I think you would see him being a much heavier favorite. But it's not the case. This fight is essentially at pick'em odds. We've seen Topuria as a slight underdog with the movement going up and down, and right now it's essentially at pick'em odds, and that's interesting to me. I'm intrigued about that. So I think Topuria should be the favorite here. I feel much more comfortable backing him. I think he's the truth, and I think that he should be roughly a -150, -155. That's where I have this fight capped. I say he gets the job done. I say he gets the KO. You have to love this one. In the flyweight division, we have the UFC return of Kyoji Horiguchi as he takes on the number 12th ranked Tagir Ulanbekov. And the number 12th ranking next to Tagir's name doesn't really describe the respect that he has in this division right now, or how close he is to fighting for the belt, I would say, right? When you actually take a look at the top 15 rankings, I mean, I think Tagir's actually closer to eventually getting a title shot than the number 12 would say. So this is a huge fight for Horiguchi in that sense too, because if he comes in here, gets the victory, I mean, he can have a quick path to fighting for the belt once again, which, if you guys forgot, he did fight for UFC Gold once upon a time. It's crazy because it seems like just yesterday to me. I remember having a little house party at my spot. It was a random spot I had back at that time. And of course, Demetrius Johnson hit him with the armbar. At the time, Horiguchi was like 24 years old, if I remember correctly. And that took place all the way back in 2015. Okay, that was 10 years ago. And everybody was looking at Horiguchi as this young stud who eventually would make another run at the title. Because when you took into consideration how young he was and how promising he was looking to be, it seemed inevitable. Of course, things played out a little differently. He did go on to win 3 more fights after that, but then he departed from the UFC. And he went on to have many respected victories. He defeated Ali Bagatinov before leaving the UFC. Outside of the UFC, he had victories over fighters like Manel Kopp, Ian McCall. He defeated Darian Caldwell up in the bantamweight division, right? He started to go up and down from the flyweight division up to the bantamweight division. He knocked out Ben Nguyen. Now, he did have some mishaps, and the loss that he had against Patchy Mix, even though it was up in weight, doesn't look as good these days, as I don't even know how Mix was defeating anybody with the way that he looks inside the cage these days. But that's an important fight to note, because Tagir is going to look to replicate some of what Mix was able to do there. I do expect that we'll see Tagir try to use some of his wrestling and grappling to try to stifle rounds and take some rounds in that fashion. So we'll see if he could replicate that. But do understand, even though Mix has looked bad, Mix is a larger fighter than Tagir. He's a true bantamweight. And also, you got to remember the knockout loss that he had to Sergio Pettis. I do believe he was winning that fight before getting hit with that wild spinning back fist, which is something that Sergio just continues to do. I mean, he's a sniper with those spinning attacks, and take that one for what you will, because he did get redemption years later in 2014. Recently, he did get that decision victory, and he followed that up with another victory over Zulu, which if you pull that fight up on YouTube and you watch it and you're not wowed, you're not overly impressed, I would just caution you to note that I think that Horiguchi was kind of messing around in there. I know there was like 2 times in that fight where he ended up on his back, but if you're really dissecting what you're watching, you kind of saw that he was kind of flowing and allowing it to happen, as you saw him just kind of instantly reverse Zulu and then get back into dominant position. I think that he was kind of playing with his food in that fight, and I wouldn't be overly concerned if you're looking at Horiguchi in that match and saying, oh, Tagir is going to be able to get the better of him. I think that Horiguchi is very live to come in here and pull off the upset over Tagir, if you want to even call it an upset. But he is the underdog here. Tagir is very productive. He goes out there and he always does just enough to get the job done, unless he's in there with Tim Elliott. For whatever reason, he didn't get that victory over Elliott, which he probably deserved to get the victory there. But Tagir is a fighter that just does enough to get the job done consistently. He's well-rounded. He gets away with being the larger fighter. That's a major advantage that he has in this division. He's so long. He's massive for the division. He does get away with that to an extent, right? There's some things that he's not necessarily great at, but he gets away with just being the larger fighter. Like his striking, for example, it's not the best, but when he has this 4 or 5 inch reach advantage, he does get away with things. He can kind of pump the jab and land some straight shots from the outside in that manner. And I do believe that his grappling is somewhat overrated. It's not as dominant as maybe you would think. And you take a look at, or for example, the Clayton Carpenter fight. He did go through some adversity and some exchanges there, and Carpenter hasn't been looking that great. The Azit Maxim fight, Azit looked horrendous in his last fight. Okay, don't get me started on that one. And that was a fight that played out relatively close. And I think I would take Horiguchi in a fight against Maxim right now all day. And you guys saw how that fight played out. So I think you guys know where I'm going with this. I am going to pick the underdog, Horiguchi, to get the job done here. I'm going to say that he wins a decision. Tagir has done enough to sneak out a lot of close fights in that manner before, but I think here it's gonna cost him. This is a fight that's gonna play out closely, and I think that Horiguchi is gonna just slightly get the better of the action. And we'll take a look at the odds for this fight, as Kyoji opened up as a plus 138, and we do see this line going the other way. So for the first time in this video, I'm actually not in agreement with the line movement. And if you were to target Kyoji here, you may want to be patient, and you may be able to get him as high as like a plus 185, plus 180. People do respect Tagir, and understandably so. He's a winner, and you know who he surrounds himself with. He's a Dagestani that surrounds himself with those elite fighters that we were just talking about a little bit ago. But this to me smells like a dog spot. I think that we see the upset. I think we see Horiguchi come in here, get the job done. He surrounds himself with very elite fighters too. Okay, he trains with some of the best lighter weight fighters in the world over at American Top Team in Coconut Creek, and he has for a very long time. And this is a massive opportunity for him. I believe that he probably turned over every stone that he possibly could, and I think he'll be prepared, and I say he wins a decision here. We'll jump up to the light heavyweight division, and I'll make this one quick for you guys. I think we'll all be in agreement with how we see this fight playing out. Right, we have the UFC debut of AbdulRakhman Yakhyaev, who represents Turkey and who looked phenomenal on Dana White's Contender Series. He's taking on Raffael Cerqueira, he's en route to challenging for the worst ever UFC resume. Right, you take a look. He's 0-3 inside the UFC. Okay, he was knocked out in his first 2 bouts against Ibo Aslan and Modestas Bukauskas, which the Aslan loss looks even worse in retrospect right now. You take a look at his most prior fight against Julius Walker, who I am not high on. I think that Julius Walker, although young and he has time to improve his game, I think he's not really all that. And Julius Walker pretty much dominated him, right? I mean, there was one round a judge gave Walker a 10-8 round there. He won 30-26, but it was a clear unanimous decision for Walker, who I don't even rate that highly. Okay, and you take a look at the numbers. He was outstruck 96-30. He was taken down 6 times on 10 attempts against a fighter in Walker who also controlled him for almost 12 minutes. And Walker, if he gets on top of you, yeah, he's large, but he's definitely not a fighter that has any kind of high-level wrestling. I mean, so there's just so many red flags going on here. But I think that the most likely scenario is that Yakhyaev is going to come out in this fight and pick right back up where he left off from Dana White's Contender Series, just throwing heavy strikes with his hands, and Cerqueira is not going to like it. All right, we saw the Bukauskas fight played out. I think that Yakhyaev is going to get a knockout here. And I'll also say this, even though I'm just kind of focusing on how much of a fraud Cerqueira is and how he shouldn't even be fighting in the UFC, especially when you also take into consideration how padded his record was coming into the UFC. He looks the part when you look at his physique and whatnot, but when you actually watch him fight, he is not a UFC caliber fighter. I think Yakhyaev has a very promising career coming up. I think that he is a legitimate prospect, and you're going to see that when these two men square off. You're going to see a clear difference in skill level. Yakhyaev is going to knock him out in the first round. Now, the only way you get bit, maybe you get bit similarly to what just happened to me at UFC 322, which I had one of my rare losses in the card. We did have a profitable event. I had a 1-unit loss on Kyle Dawkins. I had targeted him to win that fight via KO. And I had the right read. If you guys saw how that fight played out, man, GM3, he's not very easily submitted, although we know Dawkins has that skill set, but GM3 has been so vulnerable to being hit, and that's exactly what happened. And he was about 2-3 strikes away from being finished, and Dawkins had to go in for that choke there, because I understand GM3 just gave it to him, but GM3 didn't want to get hit anymore. But maybe you see a club and sub, but and I bring that up for the fact that Yakhyaev can definitely dominate this fight with his grappling. He's shown flashes early on there, and Cerqueira's bad there. So just you bring that up, but realistically, Yakhyaev goes out here and knocks him out quickly in the first round. That's my call. It looks like we're finally going to get to see Luke Riley step foot into the octagon as he's taking on my boy, Bogdan Grad. Luke Riley, without a doubt, one of the most highly touted prospects in the fight game. And if you haven't heard about him, which I would be surprised, I'm sure 99% of you guys tuned in right now, you know all about Luke Riley. I've been getting messages from you guys about him for years. And if you guys remember, he was supposed to fight on Dana White's Contender Series at the end of 2024. And I'm very happy that that fight fell through, as he had visa issues. He was supposed to be facing off with Kevin Vallejos. There was no need for Vallejos or Riley to take an L early on in their careers, as they needed to go their own path. And I would prefer that they get fed more winnable matchups where they can start to build that momentum, as then they would lead up to bigger fights such as. So I'm happy that we didn't see that fight. And I'll tell you what, Luke Riley is very hyped up, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that he is extremely entertaining. Not to say that he's not high level for his age, but he's just so entertaining to watch. He goes out there and he looks to finish you. He looks to stuff your takedowns. If you take him down, he's looking to get back up to his feet and just unload on you and finish you up. And it's fun to watch. But I would say there are fighters that are a little bit more complete that still wouldn't be as hyped or get as much attention as he's getting. And he has the look, and you know he fights out of Liverpool. He has Paddy Pimblett around him and all that. So it kind of makes sense. It's to be expected, all the hype that's coming in as he represents England. And don't get me wrong, he's a good fighter, and I think that he can go a long way in this sport. But there's some things that need to be cleaned up, and specifically with his grappling, because even if you take a look at his last fight, okay, yeah, he had a second round KO over Teriel Abasov, but early on he was put on his back, a couple times. And if you circle back to some of his early fights, right, where he fought the fellow countrymen like Jack Englund, he got another second round finish. But early on, you see him make some mistakes and get taken down at times. But that fight took place a long time ago, and he is sharpening up his overall skill set. I mean, the record, the resume is not going to completely wow you. You'll recognize the name John De Jesus as he fought in Bellator for some time. But, I mean, you do have to understand that Bogdan Grad, love him or hate him, and he's kind of been overlooked. He's the fighter that has more professional experience here. He's more mature. He's 30 years old, and he's made that walk to the octagon. And, you know, he had the knockout over Lucas Alexander, who is low level, but he did go to war with Michael Aswell, and Aswell is not a bad fighter. Okay, Aswell has some sharp boxing skills, and Grad showed some real heart in that fight. You don't need to hear me talking about that one again. I've chewed your guys' ears off about that fight. Of course, it was one of my favorite fights I've ever watched, specifically on Dana White's Contender Series, a war. We cashed in on it, and then we kind of, we started to talk. To Grad was cool. He reached out to me. I told you guys that story. I said I wouldn't do it, but I'm doing it to you guys. But, you know, in Grad's last fight against Muhammad Naimov, that was a fight where he was a pretty big underdog. And, you know, if you remember how that fight played out, man, he was right in that one. Okay, it came down to a round, and Grad had 3 takedowns in that fight against Naimov, where he had 5 minutes of control time throughout it. He stuffed 2 of the 3 takedowns that Naimov threw his way. So, I mean, Grad is showing development. Grad's background, I mean, he started with jiu-jitsu, and, you know, he's worked on his striking, but if we're being honest, he has issues defensively. Okay, he does. And we saw that in the Aswell fight. He got hit repeatedly. He leaves his chin up there. He's there to be hurt. Luckily for him, he does have a pretty solid chin when in comparison to the damage that he takes. He's only been finished once in his career, and that was via strikes, but he does have a solid chin. He's durable. But Riley's dangerous, man. He has 8 KOs out of his 11 victories. His striking's getting better and better, and he's obviously going to look better here than his last fight as he cruises up to 30. I mean, this is a fighter that has real promise. And I can sit here and talk about this fight for a while, but I'll cut to the chase. I think Riley's going to hurt Grad. I do. You could play devil's advocate and say maybe Grad can change levels and use some of his grappling ability to pull off the upset. But I think if Riley gets taken down, he gets back up to his feet, and it's very likely that he is going to hurt Grad at one point in time in this fight and get a KO. In fact, I say he gets a knockout in this fight. I mean, he's been doing it consistently. There's a couple decision victories going on here, but like I said, a lot of KOs. And even when he gets taken down early in his fights, he doesn't get down on himself. He continues to grind and looks to work his way back up to his feet and looks to hurt you. And Grad also will entertain a fun fight. He's not shy to try to land his own damage on you, and that could be an issue for him, and I could see him getting caught in that type of scenario. So I think Luke Riley gets the KO. Over here, we see him opened up as a -210, and now he's a -265. Across the board, we're seeing action come in on him, as to be expected with the big name and all the hype that's behind him. I would caution you guys, if this line, you know, it's creeping up to -300. I mean, the real answer is that there's not going to be a lot of value on him at that line, because it is possible that Grad pulls off the upset. Don't overlook his experience and the grappling potential he has here. You don't really want to be coughing up -300 on Riley, but I will be clear. I like Riley to win this fight. I really liked him in the lower -200s, and maybe you want to target him to get a KO in this spot. I like Riley. I think Riley gets the job done, but I'm just cautioning you on the line. It's getting a little high there for a fighter that needs to prove more to us. He's still young, so give me Riley via KO. So this heavyweight matchup was more recently added to the card, and we just had the odds unraveled for us, and we're rapidly seeing them change as we have the current, if you want to look at it like that, the current LFA heavyweight champion, Denzel Freeman, taking on Marek Bujło. And excuse me on the pronunciation there. This is a fighter, and Bujło, who represents Poland. It's very hard to pull up information on him. I was able to pull up two of his fights that were against very low level competition. I mean, you could just see it and their physique and the way that they looked. You could also pull up a grappling match of his, but make no mistake. I mean, he is a fighter that heavily favors his grappling. And I think he has a little bit of a sambo background. He's large, even for the heavyweight division. And if you're not up to par with your grappling, I think he potentially is the type of fighter that could take advantage of you there, even though we need to see him tested against higher level competition. But he seems to know what he's doing to an extent, right? There's a lot more that needs to be proven. Denzel Freeman, he has a bit of a wrestling background. So this is a fighter that knows how to wrestle to an extent. He trains out of Colorado. He surrounds himself with good people. He trains with high-level fighters. And he's also fought on a more recognizable and larger stage, right? We've seen him over there in LFA. He also had a couple fights over in Titan FC and on the PFL Challenger Series, where he actually had a nasty KO. That was one of his better performances, where he had the head kick KO over Raiden Kovacs. But I mean, he shows some promise. I will say this: in his one loss against Isaiah Pinson, he lost that fight via split decision. It wasn't the best look. I mean, it was kind of tough to even watch that fight. The way he was moving in there, that seemed to be an off night for him. You got to like the way that he rebounded, though, as he then finished up Stephen Ashplunge, who we just saw get a contract on Dana White's Contender Series. He pulled off the rear naked choke, I believe, if I remember correctly. Hit him with the rear naked choke, that's right. And then just had the knockout over Hugo Kuna, who we're familiar with him from DWCS as well. So at least you got some familiar names here. And I think that Freeman is the side you want to be on, just based off the fact that you can trust, or not even trust, that's not the right way to say it. There's actually a little more you could pull up. Okay, he is a fighter that has proven to have some striking ability, while he's also not a fish out of water with the wrestling. On the other hand, Marek, we have no clue how he's going to look on the feet. I mean, this is a fighter that really, realistically, may have zero striking. So I feel more comfortable backing Freeman here. And at least with Freeman, like, he's been in the cage with fighters like Johnny Eblin, right, as an amateur, and he's been around more recognizable names. He's faced off against recognizable names. He trains with more recognizable names. When it comes to Marek, I really feel like if you were to back him here, it's like you're throwing a dart at a dartboard with a blindfold on. And maybe there's some type of information you could have got from Poland that, maybe it's leaking out that he is high level and it's not on tape, but he's that guy. But I'm not able to access that, and I feel more comfortable backing Freeman in a spot like this. And the line seems to be reflecting that. I know you can't see this over on the side, but Freeman opened up as a plus 160 over here, and this line just opened up, and a lot of books don't even have it out yet. And now he is a minus 165. So we're seeing instant action come in on him. That's kind of a good sign as well. I think that's the side you want to be on. Give me Freeman. I mean, we can call a knockout. I mean, this is hard to even call a method of victory here, because we don't know how Marek is going to fare when he gets tagged and he gets hit. Is he one of those types of fighters that just doesn't like it at all? He's never been in that type of situation. We could probably easily see a TKO then. And we have seen some flashes from Freeman. Give me Freeman to win a TKO, and we'll take a flyer that this Polish fighter is a fish out of water when it comes to striking. He has some grappling abilities, but he hasn't been through any kind of adversity, and he doesn't like it. He's just 1-4 in his last 5 fights, and he's been very inactive over the last 5 years, but he's still ranked number 8 in the division. Alex Perez is taking on Asu Almabayev. Almabayev is coming off a pretty impressive victory, if you ask me, over Jose Ochoa, who Ochoa is a fighter that I respect. I know he's a young fighter that has a lot to work on, but he's a dangerous fighter. And I think that he's fighting at a high level for his age. I do believe that's the case. And Almabayev was able to enforce his will with the grappling. His grappling's high level. Now, he wasn't able to do that against Manel Kape, and he actually ended up getting finished in the 3rd round. But I think there's a very realistic chance that Kape is the best flyweight fighter on planet Earth right now. And I want to see him eventually get his title shot. Unfortunately, the way things have unraveled, he hasn't got that chance recently, but it's very likely we will see him eventually fight for the belt. The point being is, don't put Almabayev to the fire for that Kape loss, because Kape is a phenomenal fighter. Besides that, Almabayev is looked very dominant and impressive, and we know what he likes to do. He likes to change levels and use his grappling. I wouldn't say that his striking is low level. He's technical. He knows what he's doing there, but where he potentially could run into trouble in this fight is if he could stuff takedowns and keep it standing. We have seen flashes from Perez. Of course, he stopped Jussier Formiga, landing those nasty leg kicks back in the day. And around the time that happened, you really didn't see that take place so often in the octagon. So, I mean, people were really raving about how he could damage your legs. The other big victory that he had, and really the only victory that we could talk about as of recently, was the knockout that he had over Matheus Nicolau, where he hit him with that right hook early on. Nicolau definitely made mistakes in that fight. He fought a horrible fight, the way that he just refused to even try to change levels. He was just engaging in a striking affair against Perez, when Perez has shown to have deficiencies at times when you go at him in a grappling manner. And we saw that when he faced off against Tatsuro Taira right? That was no fluke injury. The way that Tyra finished him, that was phenomenal, the way he did that. And we've seen him run into trouble with his grappling. Pantoja submitted him in the first round. But again, oh, and of course, the Davison Figueiredo loss, right? He fought for the belt back in the day. That was back in 2020. That was the fight that led him to taking that layoff. He kind of departed from the fight game. I believe he had a child, but you shouldn't be going out like that. You can't be getting caught in a guillotine. And, back in the day, he was subbed quite a few times too, even before joining the UFC. I mean, he's had a track record of making those blatant mistakes down in the mat. He got caught in an armbar by Jared Papazian, who eventually did make it to the UFC actually back in the day. Adam Antolin had a prayer choke on him, caught him in a prayer choke back in the day in the second round. Okay, so, I mean, there have been these signs of him making mistakes in that manner for years. He got caught in a sub. It took just 43 seconds for him to get caught in a guillotine choke by Edgar Diaz way back in 2011. So, I mean, take those fights for what you will. Take those fights for what you will, because they did take place a long time ago. But I think that Almabayev is somewhat live to pull off a sub here. He hasn't been pulling off a lot of submissions inside of the octagon. He's been more of a decision type of fighter since joining the UFC. But back in the day, we have seen him pull off rear naked chokes and subs here and there. In fact, out of his 22 victories, 9 of them come by way of sub. Just, they're not really taking place in the octagon, but I still think there's potential there. But I actually am going to say Almabayev wins a decision. I'm going to say he goes to the grappling, and this time Perez is able to not make the mistake that cost him the fight, but he still doesn't get his hand raised. Almabayev is going to be my pick. I'm going to say he wins via decision. We take a look at the odds for this fight. Almabayev opens up over here as a minus 178, and he is currently a minus 216. So we see action coming in on him. I think that's pretty accurate. I have him capped more as like a minus 200. So maybe it's kind of trending a little bit too much towards that way. But I think that he should be more of a favorite than just like a minus 180. I think he's going to have success with his wrestling. The recipe for disaster is if he struggles there and Alex Perez starts to land damage and score points, and he gets the better of the striking, or potentially even hurts Almabayev and maybe gets a finish, which we have. Remember, we saw Kopp get that finish there too. I think that's just a little bit more unlikely. Give me Almabayev to win via decision. Here we go. We got the big boys throwing down. We got ranked heavyweight action set to take place between Sergey Spivak and Shamil Gaziev. Spivak comes into this fight off of a tough Waldo Cortez Acosta loss. It was a fight that played out pretty closely, but at the same time, we saw once again that he is a bit of a one-dimensional type of fighter. I'm really not a fan of what he brings to the table on the feet. He does have a solid judo base, and his grappling can be tricky, but I really don't have a lot of faith in him in a stand-up type of fight. And Shamil Gaziev has really shown that he has some tricks up his sleeve on the feet. He does possess power. He's long, and we saw what he just did to Thomas Peterson. And yeah, Peterson was just knocked out again, and we see that he has durability and defensive issues. But you take a look at Gaziev, man, 9 knockouts out of his 14 victories. He's a big boy, and I think that the power is there, and I think he has potential to hurt Spivak here. And at the very least, I think that he gets the better of the striking against Spivak. I think Spivak needs to have success changing levels. Now, Gaziev is not necessarily a fish out of water when it comes to his grappling. He does know what to do, but when we've seen him have success there, it's against fighters that are much more low level with their grappling compared to a Spivak, right? Like, if you remember in the Jairzinho Rosenstruck fight early on, he did get a takedown early on, and he showed to be somewhat competent. But we've seen that Rosenstruck is somewhat incompetent with his grappling, and Spivak is a much different type of fighter. So where I think that Gaziev can run into trouble is if Spivak gets early success with the grappling and the takedowns. I think that he could be in threat of being subbed, or we could see him start to tire out. And if he struggles to get back up to his feet, it could be a long night for him. But on that same note, if Gaziev stuffs those takedowns, it's really going to tire out Spivak. And I think that it's going to take a lot of his will away, which we've seen that from him. When things don't go his way, he becomes a different type of fighter. And that's where Gaziev will be live to eventually, or possibly even get a stoppage on Spivak. I do believe that is a likely scenario. It's going to be key. The takedown defense of Gaziev is going to be key here. And you just take a look at what's been going on with Spivak, who's still a relatively young fighter for the heavyweight division, right? He's 30 years old, 30 in the heavyweight division. He's a baby. He has a decent amount of experience, but If he's taking the game serious and he's looking to really make a run at this thing, there is potential here. Okay, don't just look at him and say, okay, he's won one of his last 4 fights. You take a look at the level of competition. Jailton Almeida is a tough challenge. Cyril Gane, we know he's a tough challenge. He had the submission over Marcin Tybura. He got redemption there. He pulled off the armbar, showing some of the tricks that he has even off of his back. That's where he has an advantage. We saw what he did to Derek Lewis. And I do look at this fight as a striker versus grappling type of matchup. Okay, maybe I'm kind of just dumbing it down and summing it up too much like that, or, kind of making it too simple in that fashion. But I think that's the accurate way to look at this fight. Okay, not to say that Spivak hasn't shown some development with the striking, but I don't think it's going to go good from there. And for anybody that's questioning the cardio of Gaziev, I'm not necessarily in agreement there. Yeah, he definitely slowed down against Rozenstruik, and you could also question his heart, right? He essentially quit on the stool after that. I believe it was after the 4th round. He was going into the 5th round. The real reason why he quit, in my opinion, was he knew he was fading. I think he was gassed out, and he knew he was en route to being finished in that 5th round. So you can question his heart a little bit. But I mean, that was 4 rounds against a dangerous striker and Rozenstruik, a very underrated fighter. This is a 3-round fight. I think that he'll be fine. I think now he has that in his back pocket. That was a learning experience. I don't expect to see him fade in a 3-round fight like this. And Spivak is not the same threat as a Rozenstruik. I don't think that he'll take his will in the way that a Rozenstruik did. Okay, if Spivak's having success, maybe he snatches a quick sub, or if he's getting those takedowns, I don't think that it takes the heart of Gaziev, or he's given up. So I just don't expect it to play out in that fashion. I'll just say that. Now, interesting line movement here where we see Gaziev came down from about a -190 favorite all the way to a -147 or so. So you see action coming in on Spivak. I understand the line movement here. I think that this fight should be capped closer than Gaziev being a -190, a -180 for that point. I think that the fight should be capped closer. This is a closer match. I have Gaziev being right around a -150 to a -155 favorite. So where the line currently is, we'll see where it settles. But I'm going to say Gaziev wins this fight. And I'm going to say, are we going to call a stoppage here? We've seen Spivak finished multiple times, right? 4 of his 6 losses come by way of KO/TKO type of stoppage. And that's how Gaziev typically gets the job done. He's 35 years old. You can argue that Gaziev is coming into this fight right about in his prime. I'm going to say the long, large framed Gaziev finds a finish over Spivak. I'm going to say Gaziev gets that finish in the first round. We've seen Spivak finish in the first round a couple times. I know it was against high-level competition like Tom Aspinall and Jailton Almeida. Although Almeida is not typically known for his striking, I think Gaziev can also find a first-round finish here. So this is interesting, right? Jack Hermansson has made the choice to drop down in weight. He's coming down from 185 to the welterweight division after he recently just was KO'd by Gregory Rodriguez, and he's 37 years old. Okay, that's a tough recipe there. But what also makes this fight interesting is that Miktabek Orolbey is a fighter that we've seen fight at 155 in the UFC and throughout his career. He's kind of fluctuated from 155 all the way up to 170 at times. He's had some catchweight bouts, but I'm curious to see how these two fighters look when they face off across from each other at the weigh-ins. And I'm specifically interested to see how Jack Hermansson is going to look at this weight, because he was kind of a large middleweight fighter to begin with. So, I mean, is he going to be really sucked out? How is that durability going to hold up? I have major concerns and question marks about that aspect of this fight. Now, when we're talking Orolbey, it's surprising that he's just 27 years old, right? He looks like he's much older. This is a fighter that's going to take rapid strides forward. We saw him just pull off a quick submission over Tafik Musayev, who was a dangerous striker coming into that match, but still kind of unproven. But I liked what we saw from Orolbey. He was coming into that fight off of the tough Rebecki loss. And, the Rebecki loss, man, that was a fight where he was compromised. If you remember, his eye was completely swollen shut. He still showed a lot of toughness in that match. And that was a fight that played out very closely. It could have almost went either way. But before that, he's been very dominant. What he did to Elvis Brenner, Uros Medic just didn't have the grappling to keep up with Orolbey. Orolbey's grappling is high level. And as good as Hermansson's grappling is, because he has proven to be a dangerous grappler, we have seen him taken advantage of in that light recently. You think about the finish that Roman Dolidze just had on him, right? He flattened him out and basically right, he ground and pounded him as he had him flattened out. And that's something that you rarely see. That's a very vulnerable position to be in. I don't know if Orolbay can put him there, but I think that Orolbay will get the better of the grappling here. And I think that he's potentially live to get a TKO stoppage down on the mat. The sub is not out of the question. We've seen that Orolbay can be dangerous there. Maybe you see him pull off like a face crank or something like that. Now, that's a little less likely. I think we see a stoppage more so coming by way of strikes and also on the feet. Orolbay is showing development there. And Hermansson, he could be compromised. He may get hit with the shot and he may just fold up. So I'm actually going to call the finish for Orolbay. I'm going to say he gets Hermansson out of there. And I'm expecting a good amount of people to feel there's value on Hermansson. I mean, that's kind of what I was expecting to see. And I've seen some people online kind of saying that. But you take a look at the line movement, and that doesn't seem to be the case, as we see Orolbay open up as a minus 200, and now he is a minus 250. Now, it's not extreme line movement, but the trend is not what I thought it would be. I thought that people would kind of be in on Hermansson here, feeling that he's going to have a nice large frame down in this division, and he's shown to be a pretty tough customer. He's decently well-rounded, right? He could push the pace with his cardio, even though his striking is not super refined. He can kind of push the pace there. He's tough, but he has the grappling to go to. But I think people are, from what I'm seeing here on the line, I guess it seems that some people are just concerned with him coming off the knockout loss and then dropping down in weight. So that's how I feel. Give me Miktabek Orolbay to get a stoppage here. He gets the stoppage via strikes. Volkan, no time Ozdemir, takes on Atomic Alonzo Menafield. Menafield is now 38 years old. That's an age that I had a double take at, right? One, he looks youthful. I don't feel like he's been fighting in the UFC for that long, although it has been 8 years. He was signed through Dana White's Contender Series at the age of 30. So he did have kind of a late start to his UFC career. On the other hand, Ozdemir has been around for quite some time. If you guys remember, he fought for the belt way back in the day against DC after coming into the UFC and just winning 3 fights, right? He had a split decision victory over OSP, the respected OSP. At the time, he was making some noise. Then he goes out there and gets finishes, first-round finishes at that over Misha Serkinov and Jimmy Manoa, who were also fighters that were somewhat feared and respected. So he got that quick shot against DC. He showed to be completely outmatched, specifically in the grappling department. Ozdemir was a much more one-dimensional fighter back then. But I'll tell you what, this is a guy that really rounded his game out throughout the years. And it has a lot to do with the fact that he joined up with what was at the time the Black Zillions. They turned into Hard Knocks 365. They're now Team Killcliff FC. Now, I don't really believe he's training over there these days, but he spent a lot of time with those guys, and it rounded his game out. Right? He is, without a doubt, no more a one-dimensional striker. We've seen that on display even as of recently. He had the rear naked choke victory over Bogdan Guskov, who maybe some of us were feeling was a fraud of a fighter. Guskov has shown to be not that at all. Right? He's actually somewhat of a threat to this division. And even with the grappling strides being shown, at the end of the day, Ozdemir is a technician on the feet, and that's where I expect him to have a major advantage here. Oh yeah, he could potentially change levels and exploit Menafield's grappling, but even in a straight stand-up fight, with Menafield having that power, he's going to be at a major disadvantage overall because Ozdemir will outstrike him, he'll outpoint him. I think it's more likely that we see Ozdemir get the knockout if we see a knockout. And Menafield has a lot of power. Not to say that he's not live to land his own KO, but Ozdemir is a very durable fighter. He's been finished technically by strikes twice. One was the DC fight where he just didn't have an answer down on the mat and he got ground and pounded down there. So take that one for what you will. The only other loss that he had via KO was the one he took against Yuri Prohaska, which Prohaska is a whole different type of animal. Right? I don't even need to go on about Prohaska. You know how I feel about him. That dude is the most entertaining fighter in the fight game. And that was a fight where Prohaska came in. He was coming in around that time and making quick noise, and not everybody really knew what he was about. Not to say that Ozdemir wasn't prepared or whatnot. It was what it was. But the point being is Ozdemir is a tough, durable fighter. I think he should be able to avoid that one big strike from Menafield. And I just don't see Menafield winning rounds in this fight. I don't. I mean, is Menifield going to be able to replicate what he did against Dustin Jacoby, where he's winning rounds based off the fact that he lands that one big strike, and even though he doesn't get the KO, he just lands such an impactful strike that he snags the round up. Good luck banking on that, because if you remember, Jacoby was really styling on Menifield, and I thought that Jacoby still should have got his hand raised in that fight. And after that, he gets knocked out twice in a row. If you want to do some MMA math, of course, Ozdemir just lost to Olberg via decision. Olberg gets the KO. Azamat Murzakanov gets the KO on Menifield. Now, these are nasty strikers, but we are seeing Menifield being finished. Okay, and you better believe that it is realistic that he can get KO'd here. Remember, OSP also knocked him out back in the day. I mean, so I think the durability of Menifield is a much bigger question mark compared to Ozdemir. The one shot that I believe that Menifield has in this fight is if he lands that KO. Otherwise, I just don't see him winning this fight. If I'm being honest, I don't. I'm high on Ozdemir in this spot. I like him. You take a look at the betting odds for this fight. He is currently right around a minus 242. I have no issue with that line. I think that the value is on the favorite here. I like Ozdemir all the way up to him being a minus 280, 290 favorite, almost up to a minus 300. I really do believe that he's going to outclass Menifield in this spot. I just don't see Menifield landing that big KO. To play devil's advocate real quick, yes, this is the light heavyweight division, and in the light heavyweight division, we have seen throughout the years it could be a little bit dangerous as far as just that one shot KO. So we'll see how that plays out, but I think Ozdemir is going to be a clear step ahead of Menifield. Under 1.5, we'll go with the under 1.5 here. We'll say Ozdemir gets an early TKO finish. I appreciate you tuning in to the show. Please don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you guys have not already. And go follow me on my social media where you can keep up to date with me as I got daily posts going on over there. So make sure you guys go follow me, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I appreciate you guys. Belal Muhammad takes on Ian Gary. This is a very high-level welterweight matchup. Love them or hate them, because in fact, it's quite comical. These are two of the most disliked fighters in the fight game. I think that both of them would be in the top 10 as far as the most disliked fighters in the fight game. I don't know. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree. With Gary, it all started, I would say for the most part, it started with him and Neil Magny when he started to talk about Magny and his son, his kid's relationship, which is something that no fighter should be talking about. That was just so cringe, and it was very strange. Besides that, the whole issue with his wife and that whole thing, a lot of men just don't like other men that act in that type of manner, if you will. The whole situation is just a little weird. On the other hand, Belal Muhammad, this dude is just so dry, man. This dude is like toast, man. Dry toast that's been sitting out on your counter for a week. Now, I will say this. He's extremely disciplined, and he has vastly overachieved in the fight world, in my opinion, based off that discipline that he has. So you got to give him credit there. He's not a phenomenal athlete. He doesn't do anything specifically elite. He's just very well-rounded, and his drive led him to be the champion of the world, which is quite crazy. And I'm sorry he has this belt on in the picture. That belt should be removed. But, speaking of the belt, I think it's very likely when it's all said and done that Gary becomes a champion in this division. He's extremely well-rounded, and he does specific things very well. This is a tailor-made matchup for him. I'm letting you guys know that right now. He is the kryptonite to Muhammad. I think that his footwork, his technical abilities on the feet are going to give Muhammad a lot of issues as Belal's trying to pressure and push the pace and use his kind of scrappy boxing type of style. I think Gary's just going to be skirting off to the side, just tagging him up, countering him up, and just outclassing him on the feet. I truly believe that. I mean, take a look at the numbers. Not that you see something massive here, but Gary is tough to be touched, and the numbers are extremely efficient. He knows how to grapple. He knows how to stuff takedowns. His jiu-jitsu's nasty. He's almost as well-rounded of a fighter in the fight game as you're going to see right now. The one thing that he's lacking, he doesn't have that big power in his hands, but I mean, he can mix it up with the kicks and all that, but that's the one thing that he's lacking. The heart that he showed in that Carlos Prates fight, man, things were getting crazy there at the end of that fight. I mean, he pushed through all that, and Prates once again shows how dangerous and how powerful he is. So you also note the chin right? The durability that Gary has, because he survived all that damage. Other fighters are getting flatlined when they're in there. Well, fighters like Pratis, and the Rakhmonov fight was razor close, and Rakhmonov is elite. So, and you have to note that Gary is extremely young while all these fights are taking place. He's still years away from turning 30. That's why I say he's a fighter that is very likely to hold gold. Now, this is an extremely deep division, so that's the only other thing he has in his way, a little roadblock. You got fighters like Michael Morales, Shavkat Rakhmonov. The list goes on and on. I mean, look who the champion is right now, Islam Makhachev. So time will tell what goes on in this division, but I think that this division has surpassed Belal Muhammad, who's 37. I think you're going to start to see him go on the decline. When you mix in his fighting style as he starts to slow down, I just think that, he'll be able to get away with that against certain fighters, but fighters like this that are elite and well-rounded, he's going to have a really tough time going out there and getting his hand raised against these young elite fighters that are going to surpass him. That's exactly what I see going on here. I'll cut to the chase. I think that Gary wins a decision here, a clear decision. He opened up as a minus 183 over here, and we see a lot of action coming in on him. He's now a minus 260. There's a reason why you see this action coming in. I completely agree with it. This is a stylistic, perfect matchup for Gary. He's going to win. I think he wins 30 to 27. There may be one round that Belal makes it slightly close and pushes a little bit early on, but Gary even then will still be ahead, and he should win that round. He should win every round. And that takes us to the main event, where not a lot of you guys are going to want to hear this. I know Hooker has a strong fan base. He's a fun fighter to watch. He always gives it his all, but this is such a tough matchup for him. Arman Tsarukyan is the absolute truth. How can you forget him making his UFC debut on short notice at 22 years old against Islam Makhachev and giving Makhachev one of the toughest matches that he's ever had? Of course, there was the Volkanovski fight that he had the first time around. And other than that, he was knocked out by Adriano Martinez in fluke fashion. But nobody besides those situations does what Tsarukyan did. And at the age of 22, it's crazy. And in my opinion, he should be 10-0. Since that loss, I had him defeating Mateusz Gamrot. I thought that was a bad decision. And at the very least, it was still a phenomenal performance, showing the heart and the cardio and all that he did in that 5-round war. But he should have won that fight. And since then, he's on a 4-fight winning streak, most notably the knockout that he had over Dariush, and then the Charles Oliveira victory, which he went down to the mat with one of the most dangerous grapplers the sport has ever seen. And he avoided being subbed. He was a step ahead pretty much throughout. And although you could say the fight played out somewhat close and Oliveira threatened at times, Tsarukyan he's impossible to submit. He shows to be very durable. He's very technically sound. What is Dan Hooker going to do to Tsarukyan here? I mean, is he going to stuff takedowns throughout the fight? Is he going to be able to stuff the takedowns to be able to gas out Tsarukyan? I don't see that happening. Is he going to clip him with an early shot and get the early KO? I think that may be his best case scenario. That might be his most realistic scenario to win this fight. He's not going to be able to do what he did to Mateusz Gamrot and Jalen Turner, which he arguably lost both of those fights anyway. Both of them went to split decision. Turner and Gamrot gassed out, and it cost them, even though, like I said, you still could say they both won those fights. Tsarukyan's not going to gas out. The gas tank is ridiculous. We've seen him go 25 minutes. He's just not going to gas out. And Tsarukyan is much more alive to land his own KO early on compared to Hooker landing his KO. Right? Hooker is a technical striker. He's a danger striker, but Tsarukyan carries more power. He's more durable. He's more explosive, athletic, and all that. I mean, we just saw Arnold Allen land a quick KO on Hooker. That took place in the first round. Don't forget Michael Chandler knocked out Hooker in the first round, and Chandler, I respect Chandler. He's always fun to watch, but he went on to have essentially zero success winning fights in the UFC. That does lead me back to the war that he had against Dustin Poirier, which was one of the best fights that we've ever seen in this division. I truly believe that took a lot out of Hooker. Although it's not like he's going out there. I mean, we talked about a couple KO losses, but it's not like he's getting knocked out every single time. And he was able to go out there and knock out Claudio Puelles, but Puelles is no Arman Tsarukyan, all right? So there's really no need for me to go on much more about this. I think that Tsarukyan is going to be a clear step ahead. I think I'm going to say Tsarukyan finds a finish within this fight. How does he find the finish? I can go a couple ways with it, but I think that Tsarukyan's going to hurt him. I think he's going to hurt him and probably follow him down to the mat and get a ground and pound type of finish. I think that Hooker gets finished up here. I think that Tsarukyan's going to come in hot and ready to go. And give me Arman Tsarukyan to finish this fight inside the distance. I'll call a third round finish, third round type of finish here. But I think that this is a bit of a mismatch. You take a look at the line movement. The line is an agreement with what I'm saying here. Tsarukyan opens up as a minus 420. He's now a minus 550. This line is getting pretty steep, but rightfully so. Tsarukyan should be a big favorite, and I say he gets to finish in the main event, and he should be fighting for the belt next. I mean, he really should be facing off against Ilia Topuria. If Topuria is not going to go up and wait and fight Makhachev, which I don't know, that ain't going to happen, right? I mean, what's going to happen? I think that a Topuria versus Tsarukyan fight would be an elite matchup and would do a lot for both men. Topuria would solidify himself as a real lightweight champion, and that would be a major feather in his cap if he can go out there and knock out Tsarukyan. And if Tsarukyan goes out there and defeats Topuria, obviously, that carries a lot of weight. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this one up. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you found it insightful, and I hope you guys profit on the card. Hopefully you guys are making some smart wagers out there and you put some money in your pocket. Make sure you guys bet intelligently, be smart. Don't bet money that you don't have to lose. You know what I'm saying? So be smart there. And I'll leave you guys with some quick parting words, not to go too deep, but you know, for any of you youngsters out there, I've definitely thrown this message out before. I'll tell you this, you know, your mindset that you have when you're young, it's going to rapidly change as you creep up to your late 20s, your 30s. And a lot of times when you're young, man, you don't have that care for what happens to you or with certain decision making. And as you get older, like I look back at certain decisions that I made and it kind of makes me cringe. There's certain things that really, I don't know what's the right word, you know, they almost, they just shock you, like how closely such horrible things could have happened that would have changed the trajectory of your life. But the point is when you're young, you just don't really care. You don't think you care, but just know your older self is gonna care. All right. Or if you're around to even have a conscious thought process, which that wouldn't be a good thing if you didn't have that. So make sure you're making smart decisions and try to explain and talk to yourself that although you're not feeling that those thoughts, like it's kind of hard to force yourself to care, right? If you don't care what happens to you, I understand it because I've been there. I used to walk around not caring what would happen, and it would allow you to do certain things that put you at great risk. So try to tell yourself and take my word for it that when you get older, you're going to wish that you hadn't felt like that or made certain decisions that put you at the risk of so many bad things happening. Try to take my word for it. Take my word for it. Because what happens is a lot of people get away with those decisions, but there's also a good amount of people that it catches up to them. It catches them, right? It's like picture a big group of water buffalo running through a shallow river, right? A lot of them are going to get through, but bet your boots that a couple of those crocodiles are going to snag one or two of them up, and they're going to get you. And even if you somehow make your way to the other side, it'll rip your arm off. Okay, so you don't want to be one of those water buffaloes with the ripped off arm, which in that case they're going to die anyway. But you know what I'm trying to say. You don't want to get that scar on you, and you certainly don't want anything worse than that. So make sure you're making good decisions out there, guys. I'll leave you with that. Signing out. Teller.